Hello, everyone. This is Alexander Horat with the Morgan Millennial Minute Report. The show is brought to you by David Morgan of themorganreport.com. Today, we're going to be talking to a millennial named Mike. 2 years ago, he only had $1,000 in the bank, and today he now has 2 rental cash flows. Thank you for being on the show, Mike.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for the invite.
Do you think the real estate market will crash or will it continue to go up?
Oh man, that is the question of the day right there. That's a tough one. Well, inevitably, everything that goes up has to come down. And I think especially right now, with what just got announced, I think yesterday in the news that we hit 4.2% inflation. People were whispering about maybe a 3% inflation rate, and we just blew the doors right off that and hit 4%. If you look at the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett, what's he talking about? Price inflation for a lot of the different companies that he owns. There's a lot of people that are not the Fed saying inflation is coming. The Fed, of course, is saying, oh, no, it's going to be a typical year. This is no big deal, or this is a one-time bump. But they have a very vested interest in keeping everyone calm and saying that potentially inflation isn't coming. So I think that the outrageous rate with which rents have increased and real estate values have increased is unsustainable. Whether that results in a crash, I can't say for certain, but at some point we're going to plateau and flatten out. And would there be a crash? Well, if other things in the economy continue to take a downturn, potentially, but I guess I can't say for sure.
Okay, so what is inflation going to do to the housing market?
Well, I mean, it's what's already happened right now. You know, as the government prints more and more money in the form of stimulus checks and stimulus packages. I think we did $6 trillion worth of stimulus packages last year. When you increase the money supply that much, people have additional expendable income. Well, what do they do with that expendable income? They expend it. They spend it on something. So a lot of folks are spending it in the housing market, which isn't a bad place to put your money, especially if you buy a house. At least you have a real asset that will go up in value, especially if inflation occurs. But when everyone all of a sudden has additional cash to spend, then instead of a house that's listed at $400,000 selling for $400,000, everybody can bid that house all the way up to $470,000. A friend of mine's shopping for a home in the Seattle area right now, and that's exactly what's happening to her. She's getting outbid everywhere because people are doing 70, 80 grand over asking for a home that wouldn't have even sold for 400 last year.
That's really amazing. So it's definitely going up. So what types of rental properties are best to get?
So it's a good question. There's a lot of different options that you have. You could do a single family home. You could do a 1 to 4 unit where you can get traditional owner occupied financing, conventional financing. That's like a duplex, triplex, or fourplex. And then you can go commercial. And that's anything 5 units or more, or potentially like a strip mall commercial building like that. If you are starting out, if you, like me, started with nothing, with no college education, I was a single dad paying child support with a blue collar job, no silver spoon in my mouth, and I started with nothing. What I did was what's called a house hack. So you buy either a duplex or a really, really large single family home. And when you have your mortgage payment each month, you have a tenant, in my case, on the other side of the duplex who's paying me rent. Well, I immediately apply that rent to the mortgage payment. It reduces my overall mortgage payment or my cost of living down to a much more easy to handle number. So for instance, when I bought this, I had about a $3,000 mortgage payment. He pays me $2,000. That means I only pay $1,000 to live. Now, I'm not sure where you're from, Alex. Potentially these numbers seem really inflated to you, but in the Seattle area, that's sadly pretty common for the cost of living. So if I was telling somebody today, here's how you get started, I would say buy a duplex, rent out one side, live in the other, or if there aren't any available duplexes, buy a 4-bedroom single family home and rent out 2 of the bedrooms to your best friends or your brothers or siblings or something like that, and bring some extra income in. That way, when your living expenses go down, you can save more money faster and then buy your first proper rental, which is what I did.
Yeah, that seems like a really good idea. So for rental income, what is more profitable in your opinion? Traditional rentals or vacation rentals?
So I guess it's probably going to depend on where your vacation rental is. So I mean, like if you're in Miami and people can vacation there all year long, right? The beach is never closed. I went to Miami in February and it was beautiful, perfect weather. You could potentially make more money with an Airbnb, potentially, but there's more risk associated with it. It's a balance of risk versus reward, just like with any investment. The more individuals you bring in, the more chances there are for you to get someone who's a less than desirable occupant. They could damage something, break something, steal from you, and you could end up with some sort of problem. I see a lot of people moving into vacation rentals. My concern is everyone always needs a place to live, right? You need shelter, you need food, and you need water. You don't always need a place to vacation. And when the market tanks, like it did in 2007, 2008, like it did at the beginning of 2020, when they shut down airlines and closed beaches and closed states, a lot of those people, those vacation rentals weren't doing so good. So you always need a place to live. You don't always need a place to go on vacation. And that's one of the first things to take a hit when the economy goes south. So in my opinion, I would say be safe, be conservative. The investment strategy that I outline on my channel, for those of you who don't know Millennial Mike, just YouTube it. The investment strategies I outline in my channel are a little bit safer, not quite as flashy, not as much pizzazz, but you will make gains and be profitable in a safer way.
Okay, so how is renter eviction bans affecting property owners?
Great question. So as everybody knows, the CDC, a bureaucratic, non-elected government agency in Atlanta, decided unilaterally that it had the power to invalidate all contracts between private parties at one time with one fell swoop. First time that's ever happened in the history of our country. Now, whether they're going to sit there and do some magical legal work to try to make it legal, it will be determined. I mean, I'll probably be part of that class action lawsuit. What happens when the CDC says landlords can no longer make an eviction? Well, unfortunately, not all tenants are great people. Not all landlords are great people. There are slumlords out there. And if you're a slumlord, I will be the first to stand on the side of renters and good people and say slumlords should face criminal penalties and fines. If you're not upholding your obligation, you are in the wrong and you should be sued. However, there's a large majority of landlords, in my opinion, like myself, who provide a great product, who make sure we get the repairs done in a timely manner, and we uphold our end of the bargain. Now, if my tenant is unable to pay because of an unplanned pandemic has come to our shores, then what I want to see is that I want my tenant to come to me and explain the situation. We can try to figure out a payment plan. We can try to ameliorate their financial situation. Maybe I can let them out of the lease with no penalties because it'll benefit me and benefit them. If they move back in with family, I can get it rented to someone else. But if there's no communication, and if the CDC just says landlords cannot make an eviction, here in Washington, that's been from March of 2020. It's supposed to end in June of 2021. That's 15 months of no evictions. There are people out there taking extreme advantage over that and quit paying immediately. And no, there's nothing I can do. And the naysayers will say, well, you can always file for back payment later. Well, as a landlord, and if you're interested in looking it up, you can. The amount of landlords that actually get a dime of that back payment once the tenant has been evicted, I mean, it's next to zero. Very unlikely.
Yeah, definitely. That seems really scary. So that really brings me to my next question. What states are best to buy properties at?
Well, so I am in Washington. That's where I bought my first rental. I live here. My primary job is here. And so for me to house hack, obviously I needed to buy a property here where I lived. Now, you want to look up landlord tenant laws in your local municipality and your local state. Most likely, if you're on the West Coast or the East Coast, it's probably not going to be favorable for you to be a landlord. Most likely not. There's going to be bills like the bill we just passed here in Washington, first in the nation, where now a tenant going through an eviction has a right to counsel. So just like in a criminal lawsuit where when the police arrest you, you have the right to an attorney, even if you can't afford one, the government, the state is charging you with something. You have the right to defend yourself and have legal counsel. Well, now the government is guaranteeing that you, the individual being evicted, has a right to counsel. And remember, this is not a criminal trial. This is a civil trial between two private parties or a corporation running a rental property and a private individual. The state is picking a side and providing legal counsel to one side and not the other. And all that's going to happen is that the landlord, who used to be able to go in and file their own paperwork and do their own paperwork and provide that, they now have to hire legal help themselves. It's going to elongate the process. It's going to raise costs. It's going to make it harder for tenants to get good properties because landlords are going to be more wary and requiring more money up front as insurance to offset the cost that they may end up spending in legal fees down the road. Did that answer the question? I forget. What was the question again?
Well, basically, all I'm trying to ask is, what states do you think are best for the eviction process?
Right. So states like mine that enacted that law, not super great for landlords. I mean, an eviction could take 3 to 6 months. States where I decided to invest my money in Indiana are far more favorable for businesses. They've got much lower taxes. It's much more reasonable to process an eviction if you have to. And again, I never want to evict anyone. I want to keep my tenants. The number one expense you have as a landlord is during turnover, whether that be amicable turnover, whether just moving out and moving somewhere else. You now have to pay to fix all these little tiny things and show the property, advertise for the property, do the background checks, get the new people in there. It's more time consuming. I don't want people to leave my properties. I want them to stay. So I want to go someplace where if I do have to evict them, I can do it in a timely manner where it's still fair. I don't take advantage of the tenants. They're going to be evicted if after I've exhausted every necessary option to get money from them and make them hold true to their end of the bargain or their end of the contract. If they're not, then we'll process the eviction. Ideally, we have a win-win situation where we just both uphold our ends of the bargain.
Okay, so do you think leverage is a tool that can be used against inflationary trends in buying houses?
Do I think leverage is a tool that can be used against inflationary trends?
Yeah, for buying houses.
So, I mean, leverage is how I buy my houses. I don't buy 100% cash when I purchase a house. And I know Dave Ramsey is rolling over in his grave, even though he's not dead, but he'd be mad about that. But here's the thing. If I took 100% of a cash and put it into the property and I have 100% cash equity in that property, I'm getting a lower return than if I put in 30% down and I have a low monthly mortgage payment. Now, is it safer to own a property outright 100%? Yes, but I don't think it's so much safer to own it outright that it's worth the financial impact of locking up all of my money. So I use leverage for that reason because I can acquire more properties faster. Now, I still don't encourage people to overextend themselves. You should have a healthy reserve, 6 months of expenses for all your properties before you buy another one. And then if you have a 30% down, even if the market tanks, if it drops 30% off the value of your property, you should still be break even with your property. Do I think that leverage hedges against inflation? No, I don't think it does at all. In fact, there's actually an argument that could be made that leveraging properties may even contribute to inflation, because thanks to leverage, you can now buy more than you would be able to if you were only investing straight cash. So the more you can buy and the more you can offer, you see that price inflation as costs go up. Now, in one small subset of the market where you can do this with real estate, for instance, is that going to affect the overall value of the dollar? Possibly, but it's probably pretty minor. However, we're seeing this happen in different industries now. Car manufacturers, for instance, they've realized that it's no longer about the total value of the car. What the customer or the consumer cares about is the monthly payment. So if they can get you to agree to a $200 a month monthly payment, you don't care if it's 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. And so now, for the first time ever, I just read an article that said that the average cost of a used car last year was $25,000 for a used car. I mean, you can buy a new car for that 10 years ago. So as people use debt to continue to finance their consumerism, we are going to see some price inflation. I think in the real estate market, if it was just the real estate market, it wouldn't be as big of an issue. But we live in a country where everybody puts everything on credit cards and buys everything with debt, which I don't encourage. I don't have any debt at all, zero, excluding my real estate.
Okay, so is it a good idea to hold precious metals?
So I'm not an expert on precious metals. I do think that hard assets, especially assets like gold, like silver, that have shown over time they've proven themselves as an asset that people go to in times of uncertainty. Again, I'm not the expert. I couldn't tell you whether you should buy gold coins or gold bullion or any of the other forms of, I mean, I think some people even just buy paper that says they own gold, which I think sounds a little shady to me. I'd rather have a physical asset like real estate. I can go touch my house. It's real. Gold, I can hold it. It's real. I do know a decent amount about cryptocurrency. It's an interesting topic, but it's kind of interesting to see how cryptocurrency is sort of competing with gold as a physical, I use that term lightly, as a different area to store your money and hedge against inflation or government's overspending. I definitely think probably having some gold is a great idea. As to what percentage of your actual net worth or money you should have in gold and silver, I wouldn't be able to give you a great estimate, but as always, don't keep all your eggs in one basket. I have money in the stock market, I have cash, I have real estate, and I have a pension plan. So, diversify.
Right, hard assets are definitely good. So what is a good way for millennials to build and preserve wealth?
Well, probably the first thing you need to do is be educated. So, I mean, Alex, let me ask you a question. You're 17 years old, you're in high school. I assume you at least used to go to high school before the virus. But do you get any real financial education about the topics that I've talked about or you talked about at all in your school?
Not in regular school, but I'm homeschooled.
Okay, you're homeschooled. Well, then good. So maybe you probably get something from your parents, probably,
Yeah,
ideally.
yeah. My parents teach me.
Okay. Well, I went to public school. Obviously, I'm not that smart, but I went to public school. There is zero education on about financial education. I mean, you don't really learn about how to do taxes, how credit cards work, how interest works, how compound interest works, what it means to have a mortgage, how to buy a house. You don't learn anything about that. And I'm not going to go down the path of, well, it's a conspiracy by the government to keep you stupid. For whatever reason it's happening, and it's not a good thing. So what happens when people like my little brother join the army at 18, they get their first paycheck and they're approved. Oh, I'm approved to buy whatever car I want. They go out and they buy that Dodge Charger or that Challenger and they sink 40 grand into a car they're going to pay for in 8 years. That is the number one way that you can not build wealth if you're trying to. So if you really want to build wealth, the number one thing you need to do is get educated. There's a lot of people online selling courses, selling classes, and I refer to these people as fake gurus. Most of the time, they're just trying to hype you up on a let's get rich quick plan and then sell you $1,000 worth of courses that don't work, and you lose a bunch of money, become disenfranchised, and eventually turn into a socialist. And that's happening all over the country, unfortunately. There is so much free information, like YouTube channels like yours, YouTube channels like mine. You can get anything you want out of a book. If you don't like to read off of a YouTube channel or a podcast, you can learn an unbelievable amount. I didn't go to college, yet I still think I'm relatively well educated about financial things because I read and I listen. So if you want to be successful, start studying investments, whether that be a Roth IRA, 401k, stocks, hard assets like gold and silver, day trading, which is a little bit more dangerous. You really need to study hard on that one. Real estate investing. Shoot, a lot of people just buy stuff off Craigslist and flip it, or go to a garage sale, buy something and flip it. If you focus in on one niche and become an expert at it, you can become financially successful. And then the next big key thing is just avoid debt. Don't buy stupid stuff. Don't go spend money on alcohol at the bar. I'm not saying don't have fun with your friends and party once in a while, but if you're out every weekend getting blasted with your homies, you're going to feel that in your paycheck.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Education is key. So where can the viewer find you?
Millennial Mike, just type that into YouTube, type it into Instagram, type it into Google. I have a decent amount of videos. They should pop up. My channel it's I noticed back when I started learning about real estate that everyone who was teaching me about real estate, they were a millionaire who had made their money like 20 years ago, and they were telling me how I should do it today. I wanted to make a channel that explained how you do it in real time, what the successes and failures are, and how long it's really going to take. So you type in my name, my first video is me, poor, renting with no money in my bank account. And one of my more recent videos is now I got a $300,000 net worth. I don't own just 2 rentals. I own a total of 4, 3 in another state, 1 here. You can do it too. It takes time, takes a little bit of grit, and a lot of education. So yeah, just look up Millennial Mike.
Well, that sounds really great, Mike, and I would like to thank you for being on the show.
Hey, no problem, Alex. Thanks for the invite, man. I appreciate it.
And thank you for everyone who is watching. God bless.